I just wanted to do a quick Legends of Canton podcast. I wanted to do more of these. It's just been a tough last 2 months with work. I had COVID for a little while, and I got this injury to my left wrist. So been dealing with all of these things. But I did want to get in some playoff picture stuff just to get people excited about these last 3 weeks. I purposely schedule all division rivalries in these last 3 weeks so that every matchup matters and that everyone kind of has the same fair schedule to close out the season. So I just wanted to go through a few things, going over the playoff schedule and just things to look forward to for trade deadline and kind of just a recap of the stats so far. So first and foremost, the trade deadline is next Thursday. So you have a week to continue to do those trades. I know there's been a lot of trades lately. A reminder that your draft position is determined by your top 26 players overall score. So if you want to get a better draft pick, you probably would want to trade away players that have scored a lot. Just kind of a secret strategy in order to do that. We'll go over playoff format and the toilet bowl, playoff picture, like I said, year-to-date team stats, and then as it stands right now, the draft order of teams that have not made the playoffs, or that won't make the playoffs, I should say. So the playoff format, similar to last year, we play our regular season 3 more weeks through week 14. And then week 15, we'll have the number 1 team versus the number 4 team and the number 2 team versus the number 3 team. This will be for each conference. Week 16 will be the conference championships. So similar to the AFC championship, NFC championship in the real NFL. And then week 17 will be the Super Bowl, best AFC versus best NFC. And it'll be the third place game with whoever lost in the previous week. Just a reminder, the seeds are determined by highest victory points. So it'll be the 3 division winners ordered based off of victory points. And then the number 4 team is the 1 wildcard team. That'll be the highest remaining victory points of the teams that did not win their division. The tiebreaker after victory points is overall win-loss. And if it's still tied, it would go into divisional wins and losses. The toilet bowl format is a little bit different. There's going to be 16 teams that do not make the playoffs. I'm going to take the top 8 scores from week 14, and you'll be placed in a bracket for week 15. It won't reseed based off of the results there. It'll be week 15, 1 versus 8, 4 versus 5, 7 versus 2, and 3 versus 6. After that, the week 16, the top 4 teams that each won would advance. And then week 17, we'll have our toilet bowl championship and third place matchup for the toilet bowl. A little incentive to keep setting your best lineup. The toilet bowl winner does receive a payout and comp pick 3.25. So the last pick of the third round. Second place will receive 4.25 and third place will receive 5.25. Now the playoff picture. Playoffs, you're telling me there's a chance. So first, the AFC East. It's kind of a 2-team race here. Fire and Maulers are both towards the top, only separated by 1 victory point each. There's all different scenarios how one team or the other could finish with more victory points. So I just wrote either team would win the division if they have more victory points than the other, as kind of a cop out on that. But for example, obviously depending on how many games they win against the other two division rivals and if they're getting victory points for high scores. So it's anybody's game at this point. I know the matchup between Fire and Maulers will decide a lot of what direction it goes, who is likely to win the division. As far as making the playoffs at all, both of these teams have a pretty good lead over the next highest, which you'll see on another slide. In order to get a wild card, if they didn't win the division, Fire would have to gain at least 4 victory points, would guarantee a playoff berth, or get 2 victory points and the Maroons loses a game. Similar to the Maulers, if he gains at least 5 victory points or at least 3 victory points and the Maroons loses 1 game. The Crush, unfortunately, doesn't have a path to win the division, but for wild card, unlikely odds, but there is still mathematically a possibility. He would have to go 3-0 with 12 victory points, meaning a top 8 score every single game. Maulers would have to get 0 victory points, and the Maroons would have to score less than 7 victory points. As far as the Baltimore Stallions, unfortunately, he's out of contention for the division and the wild card. AFC Central, Cincinnati Reds has a clear lead here. For the division, he only has to score 1 victory point, so that's extremely likely. And he's already clinched a division, he's already clinched a playoff spot. So that no matter how he finishes, he's going to have a spot in the playoffs. The Maroons is the next highest victory points. And in order to win the division, she would have to go 3-0 and Reds would need to score 0 victory points. So that seems kind of unlikely. She does have a chance to get the wild card if she goes 3-0 and she finishes with higher victory points than Maulers or Fire. And as a reminder, Fire and Maulers, Fire had 33 and Maulers had 32. So 7 victory points higher than Maroons, but there is still a chance if, for example, the Maulers have a really bad stretch the next 3 weeks. Barcelona Dragons, again, similar to the last division, unfortunately out of contention for the division title, but another long shot to make the playoffs if he goes 3-0 with 12 victory points. The Maulers score either 0 or 1 victory point, and the Maroons score less than 8 victory points. And then the last team in this division, the Miami Hooters, is out of contention for the division or the wildcard spot. For the AFC West, Tigers has already clinched the division and already clinched a playoff spot, so he really doesn't have anything to play for here. And unfortunately, the other 3 teams in his division do not have a shot at the division or that wild card spot. So this is laying out what the wild card race looks like. Maulers has the lead by 7 points over the Maroons. So very likely it's between those 2 teams. And then the Dragons and the Crush has an outside shot if the 2 teams ahead of them do really bad the next 3 games. So for the NFC East, this is probably a 2-team race, but the third team does have an outside shot at, the third team has a shot at wild card. It is a 2-team race for the division, just because both teams wouldn't mathematically be able to go 0-3. So at least one of them is going to have enough victory points to clinch the division. Again, they're Gunslingers and Bulldogs are tied. So whoever has more victory points is going to win this division. Likely whoever wins in their matchup in the next 3 weeks is going to have the inside track to win the division. Because the NFC is so competitive for this last wild card position, any team that wants to be guaranteed a playoff spot likely has to go 2-1 or 3-0 in order to get that last spot, just because everyone is so close. So in order for the Gunslingers or the Bulldogs to make sure that they get the wild card spot if they don't win the division, they'll want to go at least 2-1. 3-0 is better, obviously, but 3-0 would probably get the division title anyway. As I mentioned, the third team, Los Angeles Dons, unfortunately, he's out of playoff contention, but if he goes 3-0 with 12 victory points and the Bulldogs scores less than 4 victory points and he has a higher victory points than the rest of the NFC teams, he could possibly make the playoffs. Again, it's a relative long shot. The Gunners is the last team, and unfortunately, he's out of contention for any playoff spots. And then the NFC Central, this is really a 3-team race. It's all going to come down to these last 3 weeks because they all play each other. Right now in the lead is the New Mexico Stars, who has a 3 to 4 point victory points lead over the other 2 teams. If he defeats Brigades and Outlaws, he'll win the division. Again, if he at least goes 2-1 and has higher victory points than the other NFC wildcard teams, likely one of these 2 teams, Bulldogs or Gunslingers, he would have a playoff spot. It's a little bit harder for Brigade and Outlaws just because they do have they're trailing a little bit for victory points, not only from the Stars but also from the Gunslingers and the Bulldogs. So they have to work a little bit harder. Brigade would need to defeat these other 2 teams in the division, the Stars and the Outlaws, and the Stars would have to go 1-2 or worse to make up that gap in victory points. Similar, has to go at least 2-1 with higher victory points than the other teams if he wants to get the wild card spot. Outlaws, very similar, beat the other 2 teams that are at the top of this division, Stars and Brigade, and Stars would need to go 1-2 or worse. Again, sounds like I'm repeating myself over and over, but in order to make the playoffs in the NFC as a wildcard team, these teams will likely have to go 2-1 and get higher victory points than these other teams. The last team in the division, Atlantic City Blackjacks, unfortunately is out of contention for both the division and the wildcard spot. And then the last division, similar to the AFC West, the NFC West, the Claymores has clinched a division and clinched the playoff spot, and the other 3 remaining teams are unfortunately out of contention for the division or that wild card spot. So this is kind of a clearer picture of what the NFC wild card looks like. Again, the division leaders are not very far ahead of these teams, if not tied. So the Gunslingers is ahead right now just because of his better overall record than the Bulldogs. So that's still anyone's game since they both have 37 victory points. So either one of them could possibly get this wildcard spot. The Stars in the Central Division has 36 victory points, so a narrow lead ahead of Brigade and Outlaws. So any one of those 3 teams could possibly get the wild card depending on how these matchups go. And then, as I mentioned before, mathematically, the Dons could still make the playoffs. I think I haven't 100% crunched the numbers, but he'd need a lot of help from some of these other teams having a bunch of losses the next couple weeks. I did want to point out also that this year was really interesting because some of the teams that weren't as good last year, such as the Maroons and the Dons, even the Crush, all have somewhat of a chance of making the playoffs. So that was a huge improvement on their part. Well, we also will likely have a couple new either division winners or playoff contenders with the Maulers, Bulldogs, and Gunners. Likely at least two of those are going to make the playoffs. So it's kind of cool to see some parity here. I think a big part of that is mixing up the divisions every year, any team that don't make the playoffs. So I just thought that was exciting to see a couple different teams in and making it more competitive. So I wanted to just do kind of a high level look at what these teams have done so far for points scored, offensive points, and defensive points. So as you can see, most of the teams that are in playoff contention are in this top 1 to 12. I found it interesting that some teams that were expected to have really good offense or expected to have really good defense, it totally went in a different direction. For example, I thought my team would have, we talked about in the beginning of the year that my team would likely have a top offense and likely have a mediocre defense, but I'm at 9 offense and 5th defense. So that was totally flipped around, unexpected. A couple other interesting ones I thought were the Stars has a middle of the road offense, but has the #1 defense. So that is what's bringing him up there. And then you look at a couple of these other teams that are also playoff teams, Bulldogs, Reds, and Outlaws. All of them have relatively high offense, but their defense is bringing them down. So if you have one or the other is really good, obviously that helps. Again, some of these are unexpected as far as thinking one side of the ball would be better than the other, and it was the total opposite just because this year is so strange. Again, as I mentioned before, Maroons and Dons, kudos to them. They have improved a lot from last year, improved a lot from the expectations at the beginning of the year. Both of them have pretty much right in the middle of the road score for offense and defense. And then looking at the ranked 13 to 24, these teams start to get double digits ranking for both offense and defense. So unfortunately, it hasn't, I don't know what to say. Unfortunately, their teams weren't as good as they would have liked, but hopefully that can translate into better draft picks for the rookie draft. Which brings me to the last slide. I took all the teams that are currently mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. This doesn't mean that this is going to be the order, because we still count everything through week 17. So we still have, I guess, 6 more weeks of determining overall points for all the players on the roster. And again, it'll be the top 26 scorers. So even if they were on your bench, it's just the amount of points that they scored. So right now, it's the top 3 are Gunners, Hooters, and River Monsters. And then following up on those is Rebels, Steagles, Stallions, Blackjacks, Oilers, Eskimos, and Express. One thing I wanted to point out here, some of these teams are a little bit on the higher side. we obviously have 16 teams that will not make the playoffs. So we would add in 6 more of those potential wildcard teams into this. And for example, I think all the teams that are 6 through 10 here have a high enough score that they might even end up with draft picks in the higher teens, just because some of those teams that are wildcard contenders might have a worse top 26 scores. Yeah, so I hope I didn't put you to sleep. I hope that was relatively interesting, just seeing how it was broken down a little bit. I do want to have more podcasts in the future. I think in the off season, it'll be easier to do a lot more analysis with this, but hopefully next season I have more frequent podcasts to kind of keep everyone engaged and informed. And of course, I love doing these. So hope you enjoyed it. I might have another quick recap just before the playoffs start. So stay tuned for that. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone, whether you're watching this podcast before Thanksgiving or after Thanksgiving. If you're watching it after, I hope your Thanksgiving was good. Yeah, so good luck with the rest of the season, and we'll talk to you soon.